The events take place in 1918 on a farm in Texas. A girl named Pearl looks at her reflection in a mirror, imagining herself as a famous dancer. However, her fantasies are interrupted by the domineering mother, who disapproves of her daughter's interest in dancing. Ruth orders her to go to the barn and feed the animals. Pearl has no choice but to obey. This is not the life she dreamed of. Pearl knows she is special and that her place is not on the farm but on the big stage. Few people are aware of Pearl's hidden sadistic tendencies. For now it is only directed at animals, but how far will she go? In the evening, mother and daughter were preparing dinner. Ruth repeated that her daughter should no longer waste time on nonsense like dancing. Pearl has many responsibilities, working on the farm and caring for her father. When Pearl saw in the newspaper that Allied forces had liberated France, she was overjoyed, as this meant the war would soon be over. But Ruth refuses to hear anything about the dead Germans. Pearl takes care of her paralyzed father. Before dinner, Ruth said a prayer and then ordered her daughter to feed the father. As always, Pearl complied. After dinner, she reread letters from her husband Howard, who is at the front. Only thoughts of his wife and home give the brave soldier strength. After giving the father his medicine, Pearl said she would go to town the next day to buy more for him and go somewhere else. The girl dreams of dancing, believing it is her destiny. Ruth sternly reminded the daughter to cover her face in town and to avoid unnecessary contact with people because the Spanish flu epidemic had returned. The next morning, in a cheerful mood, Pearl went to town and bought the needed medicine at the pharmacy. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Pearl stopped by the movie theater, where a film about dancers was playing. The girl watched the graceful actresses with admiration. This inspired her even more. A handsome man started a conversation with her, offering her a cigarette. Pearl sadly confessed that she dreams of becoming a dancer but must care for her sick father. The man, who introduced himself as a projectionist, offered Pearl a free ticket to the second screening of the film, but she had to decline, as the mother was already waiting for her. The projectionist said that caring for family is commendable and gave Pearl a piece of film. No one would notice if a single frame went missing. The man would be happy if Pearl returned. She hurried back to the farm, unable to stop thinking about the dancers on the screen. At some point Pearl stopped, threw her bicycle onto the road and walked into a cornfield. Pearl's attention was caught by a scarecrow. She climbed onto it, threw it to the ground and began dancing with it. Suddenly Pearl imagined the projectionist in place of the scarecrow and shouted that she was married. But then the girl cast aside all morality and gave in to her fantasies. Ruth was outraged that the daughter had been gone too long and assigned her several chores. During dinner, Ruth demanded that her daughter return the change from the medicine. Pearl lied that she had bought some caramels on the way back. For this, Ruth deprived her daughter of dinner. Pearl wanted to leave the table, but the mother ordered her to sit. Ruth reminded how difficult life is for German immigrants in America now. They survived only because they managed to organize their lives. From now on, Pearl must put any naive thoughts out of her head and become more responsible. Before bed, the girl prayed to God to make her the biggest star so that she could get as far away from this place as possible. Early the next morning, Pearl was as always doing her chores. Their farm was visited by Mitzi, Howard's sister, and her mother. They brought food for their less affluent relatives. When she learned that there had been no new letters from her brother, Pearl's husband, for a long time, Mitzi said how sorry she was. Ruth flatly refused to accept help from the relatives. Mitzi shared a secret with Pearl. On Saturday there would be auditions at the church for a dance troupe that would then tour 6 different cities. The girls agreed to go together. Pearl was overjoyed, thinking that this was her chance. More than anything in the world, the girl dreams of conquering the stage. The next morning, while the mother tended to the flowers in the garden, Pearl was planning to escape. It seemed as though Ruth sensed this and began searching for her daughter all over the house, but Pearl managed to hide just in time. Later, Pearl tried on her mother's fancy dress in front of the mirror. Waiting until nightfall, the girl snuck out of the house and rode her bicycle into town. She knocked on the door of the movie theater, and the projectionist immediately invited her inside. Pearl remarked how wonderful it must be to watch movies for free every day. The man offered her a drink and asked why she was here. Pearl said she wanted to live not just for the parents but for herself. The man suggested that Pearl watch a film no one else had seen. He had illegally acquired it during his service in France. The girl was intrigued. It turned out to be a film of a genre banned from public viewing. Pearl watched attentively. She had never seen anything like it before. The projectionist explained that Europe was full of such underground films. There was a lot of money to be made from them. Pearl confessed that she wanted to be free. The projectionist advised her to follow her dreams right now. But Pearl didn't want to abandon her parents. She wished they would simply be gone. The girl was willing to do anything to make it to the stage. The projectionist told her that in Europe, art is much more alive. They could run away there together. Before leaving, Pearl thanked the projectionist for letting her in. She quietly snuck back into the house and heard her mother sobbing. Trying to keep quiet, Pearl returned to her bedroom. The photo of the husband on the nightstand irritated her. The next morning, Pearl wheeled her father to the lake and called out to the alligator, Theta, named after the actress Theta Bara, whom Pearl occasionally fed. Pearl would be leaving soon, so she didn't want her father to suffer because a life like his was no life at all. However, the girl didn't get a chance to carry out her plan, as the mother interrupted, ordering her to take the father back to the house. Pearl asked the mother why she hated her so much. Ruth replied that she only wanted what was best for her. Later, Pearl went to the barn. It seemed to her that the animals were staring at her. Thinking about the husband, Pearl vented her anger. Ruth had already found the daughter's flyer from the movie theater and as punishment, ordered Pearl to isolate herself in the old house. Pearl might have caught an infection in a public place and was now putting the whole family at risk. Pearl told the mother about her intention to audition for the dance troupe. Ruth in turn accused her daughter of being ungrateful. Ruth couldn't understand what more Pearl wanted. She had always had food on the table and a roof over her head. The girl tried in vain to convince the mother that youth comes only once, so you must seize every opportunity. Ruth no longer wanted to hear this infantile nonsense. Ruth couldn't understand why she should take care of a sick husband and run the household while her daughter enjoyed life. Ruth considered herself a strong woman and being very religious, saw dancing as a sin. When Pearl tried to explain herself again, she was slapped by the mother. Pearl retaliated in kind, which led to a fight between mother and daughter. When Pearl pushed her mother toward the fireplace, the woman sustained severe burns. The girl dragged her into the basement. The father remained in the kitchen the entire time. Abandoning her father, Pearl, drenched by the rain, went to the movie theater and immediately kissed the projectionist. The girl had a nightmare. Upon waking, she hurried to tidy herself up. Today was the day of the auditions, so Pearl had to rehearse her act. The projectionist offered her a ride home. When they arrived, Pearl asked the projectionist to wait outside. In the meantime, she went into the kitchen. Her father of course was still sitting in the same place. Pearl apologized to the father and after making sure no sounds were coming from the basement, quickly cleaned him up. The projectionist waited outside for a long time. When Pearl finally invited him inside, she introduced her new friend to her father. The man was unable to ask for help. Pearl suggested that the projectionist go to her room. When strange noises started coming from the basement, the man decided to check it out. Pearl tried to dissuade him, but the projectionist went anyway and found the kitchen in disarray. Clearly something had happened here the day before. The girl crept up from behind, saying that their dog made a mess in the kitchen, so she locked it in the basement. Pearl suggested that the projectionist take a look at the animals in the barn. The man was clearly nervous about the girl's strange behavior. When he asked what their dog's name was, she replied that they didn't have a dog. Trying to remain calm, the projectionist said that it was time for him to leave. Pearl became upset, not understanding why the guy suddenly lost interest in her. Did he see something he wasn't supposed to? Pearl's behavior became increasingly terrifying. Wishing her good luck at the auditions, the projectionist got into his car, but Pearl followed him with a pitchfork and took his life. Pearl's greatest fear is being stuck on this farm forever. Opening the basement door, Pearl told her mother, who was barely breathing, that they had now switched places. After that, Pearl tended to her father as if nothing had happened and put on her mother's red dress. The man was horrified, but all he could do was watch his daughter's actions. Taking a towel and thanking her father for everything, Pearl took his life. She then pushed the car with the projectionist's body into the swamp where the alligator Theta lived. Pearl arrived at the church for the auditions. Like Mitzi, she was very nervous. Pearl had already packed her things, confident that her dance would win over the judges. All the girls who were rejected ran out in tears. Pearl managed to hold herself together better than Mitzi because she was used to fear. Mitzi suggested that Pearl go first. She agreed, seeing no point in delaying the inevitable. Time passed excruciatingly slowly. The girls encouraged each other in every way possible. Pearl's turn finally came. She performed her dance in front of the judges, but they rejected her, saying she was not young enough and did not fit the American ideal of beauty. Pearl lacked the spark that would set her apart from the other dancers. The girl couldn't hold back her emotions, begging the judges to give her another chance. Pearl feels she was born for the stage, but the judges clearly did not share her opinion. Pearl became hysterical and cried loudly outside the church. Mitzi offered to walk her home, trying to comfort her. At the farm, Mitzi immediately sensed that something was wrong. Pearl was visibly upset and shared with Mitzi that she wasn't like other people. If Pearl spoke openly, others might think she was crazy. Mitzi was willing to listen to Pearl. Pretending that Mitzi was Howard, Pearl expressed how much she hated him for leaving her. Mitzi was shocked to hear that Pearl had been unfaithful to her husband. Pearl continued to be frank, saying how much she hated life on the farm. The girl had hoped that the husband would take her far away from here. She even hid who she really was for that. But instead, Howard volunteered to go to the front. Listening to this, Mitzi was speechless. Pearl doesn't understand why God doesn't hear her prayers. The girl just wants to be loved by everyone and to be rewarded for all her suffering. Now Pearl realizes that someone like her is not destined to become a star. Pearl wishes she could be more like Mitzi, who was luckier with her looks and family. At that moment, the girl desperately wanted to ease her conscience, so she confessed to taking the lives of her parents and the projectionist. Pearl always hated her domineering mother, but her father didn't deserve such a fate. Now, Pearl thinks that if she creates a cozy home for Howard, he will come back to her, and everything will be fine. Barely maintaining her composure, Mitzi said that it was time for her to go home, or her parents would start to worry. Through manipulation, Pearl made Mitzi admit that she had won the audition. Now Mitzi would be performing all over the state. Before Mitzi left, Pearl asked her to keep quiet about what had happened. Mitzi promised to keep the secret and left, but Pearl, tormented by jealousy, followed her with an axe in hand. Mitzi ran, desperately calling for help, but she tripped. Pearl caught up with her rival and took her life. After that, Pearl went down to the basement, where her lifeless mother was. Then, to partially atone for her guilt, Pearl created a cozy atmosphere in the house for her husband. Finally, Howard returned from the war with other soldiers. But when he came home, he witnessed a terrible sight. His mother-in-law and father-in-law sat lifeless at the table. Pearl smiled and told her husband how happy she was that he was back. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel not to miss more exciting new products. Also, the authors will be pleased if you leave your opinion in the comments.